Hello and welcome back to the Kalopsia podcast. I'm your host, Sydney, and I'm thrilled to have you guys with me on this week's episode, which is going to be on contradiction. Now, I want to preface by saying I have been ill over the past week, so please forgive my voice. It's a little bit raspier than usual, but I kind of like that. But if I'm a little bit nasally, that's why. But I digress. I wanted to talk about life as a contradiction and what the role contradiction has on our society is, not only just on our society as a whole, but also on ourselves and the way that we carry ourselves and kind of lead our way through lives. Now, I feel like as a baseline, we are attracted to contradiction. And I was kind of invited to think about this because of the concept of rage baiting. I feel like when it comes to online, social media, the news, I think that they do it too, but I feel like even on TikTok or on Instagram or on YouTube, the videos that will do the most well in views or whatever in conversation is things that invite us to think about a topic in a contradictory manner. So what do I mean by this? When we look at social media, when we look at TikTok, I'm thinking more specifically, when you're trying to make something that you really want to get a lot of views or you really want to, make a splash in the pool in the conversation, a lot of the time, creators are going to make a topic or make a video that is going to make you have a gut punch reaction, such as, this is why you shouldn't brush your teeth at night. It's like, what do you mean? Of course you have to brush your teeth at night. And so you're going to watch the video all the way through. Even when it comes to film, we often see contradiction as something that draws us in, something that we need to, argue about. It's something that we're attracted to. It's something that's going to generate conversation, and it's something that works well, which is why so many content creators, often get accused of rage baiting, even in thumbnails or, video titles. And so when I was thinking about this, I was thinking how, okay, we're seeking it, we're creating it, we love contradiction when it comes to external media. What does it mean for contradictions within ourselves? Now, a TikTok actually made me want to delve deeper into this, and I found it so interesting. The video was actually created by a creator called Chrissy, but her handle is Christina.Adane, Adane. But I thought her video was fantastic. And what she started out by saying was that we are, and wisdom and intelligence comes from understanding that we are walking contradictions as human beings. We are contradictions. We are walking hypocrites, but we need to be conscious hypocrites. But what does she mean by this? We often see ourselves as, trying to put ourselves in a certain category. I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody else here, but I feel like when it comes to my favorite content creators or, people that I like to watch online, on Instagram, whatever, we're often able to put them in a box. And I think this is particular to social media as well, but a lot of our lives is spent on social media scrolling. So I feel like it is something that we need to think about what we're consuming. But even when it comes to content creation as a whole, of course, we're going to think, okay, we need to put ourselves in a niche. We need to say, okay, I'm a gym bro, or I'm a clean girl, or I am a baddie, or I am a, makeup guru, or, and we almost put ourselves in these categories and these niches, even as non-content creators and just people, we're thinking, I'm a bookworm, that's kind of like my vibe, that's my theme, that's the theme of my personality. Or maybe I am an earthy, crunchy type of person. I love to hike, I love to be outdoors, I love to do cold plunges, and that's kind of my vibe maybe. And a lot of the time I feel like what ends up happening is we end up kind of locking ourselves within our niche, whether that be because we are kind of stuck trying to create in the certain niche, when we're on the content creation side. But I feel like even outside of that, I feel like it becomes a persona that we almost become locked into. But I feel like something else that comes to mind when we're thinking about how we can lock ourselves in a particular persona is also within our views. And I feel like when I was doing some research for this episode, I stumbled upon a lot of philosophers because I was looking for philosophical quotes, which we'll get into at the end. But I was thinking about philosophers, and something that they always say about philosophy majors is that, it'll ruin their lives. It'll ruin their lives. They end up looking at the world and they're like, what the hell, what the actual hell is going on? I feel like I am leaving this with less confidence than I had coming out. And it's because that they understand that the deeper you hone yourself into a certain area of study or area of research, or the deeper that you hone that niche, the more that you'll know technically, but philosophy in particular, the less that you know. But we'll get into that at the end. But let's say, for example, that you are an English major. You say that you are the English major, you know everything, you actually went to graduate school, you know so much about English and literature, and you are so sure and so immovable in your understanding of what you see as literature, what you see as good literature, what you see as bad literature. And what that ends up happening, or what that ends up producing, is conflict. When you are presented with a person that has a different educational background, or maybe studied a different type of literature, whether that be Italian literature for one, and then you two are sat together comparing and coming to the conclusion of, what, this is actually not what I think is correct, your view is wrong, my view is correct, and what that will lead to is impasse, right? It'll lead to a misunderstanding. Maybe you guys will be unable to meet in the middle. And I think that the problem with that immovability, is that a word? The problem with that incapacity to look at others' views as something that can be validated, something that can be taken in. And what I'm trying to say is it becomes more difficult to internalize others' opinions or others' views when you hone yourself too deeply into your particular view. The reality that comes to mind when we're thinking about how we are walking hypocrites is that no person can be completely homogenous in their particular standpoint. No person should be able to stick to the same view for decades and decades and decades at a time and stick to that one particular mindset, that one particular standpoint for that extended period of time. When you think about your favorite movie or your favorite show, think about your favorite protagonist, right? Your anti-hero, if you will. It is natural and it is expected for them to stray from their predetermined script. I was just watching Ginny and Georgia last night. A great but terrible show. Terrible but a great show. And I feel like those characters in that show are so contradictory when it comes to the way that they portray themselves versus what they feel in their internal planets. But the same could be applied across so many different, shows. It's not particular to Ginny and Georgia. But the bottom line is that we welcome contradiction when it comes to external media, but we are so afraid to find it within ourselves. Something else that Chrissy brought up in her TikTok was that she hates these do-gooders and high grounders who believe that nobody should stray from their, preconceived niche or their preconceived morals, right? Nobody should be able to stray from their morals when you are telling yourself, this is what I stand for, but then you do something slightly against it. For example, actually, Scum is a show that's coming out right now. Scum was a Norwegian show that came out in 2015. The current version that's coming out is the Croatian one, but that's besides the point. The story remains the same. But in season 2 of Scum, there's a particular storyline in which the main girl, does something that is completely against her, morals. Everything that she stands for, it goes against that, what she's doing. But she can't seem to help herself. But when we watch her on screen, we think to ourselves, of course, like, yeah, you shouldn't be doing this, but it's also safe to explore this for your own life and for your own heart. It's within your breath to try to explore this. And I'm trying not to spoil it for anybody who's watching the current version coming out, which I really, really recommend. It's amazing. What we are drawn to and what we are unable to turn it off for is that complexity in her character. It's that nuance in her character. Why are we so open to welcome that with open arms in them, but not within ourselves? Now, when it comes to these high grounders, moral high grounders, I feel like what we hate within those types of characters is their rejection of nuance, their rejection of complexity, their understanding of the life being so black and white. The truth is that we are going to do things that go against our character. We are going to do things that go against our morals. What matters is how we move through that. What matters is how we internalize that. Something that Chrissy said that I really think is important is the word conscious. She said, we are conscious hypocrites. What is distasteful is being a hypocrite, but thinking that you are still being a do-gooder. What is distasteful is putting others down and taking away their right to make mistakes, their right to come to conclusions on their own, their right to find that complexity within themselves. We cannot expect everybody to do things right the first time around. We cannot expect everybody to stick to their morals and stick to their internal rules every single time, all of the time. Everybody makes mistakes. I think something else that I think of when I think of how we are walking contradictions as human beings is how we need to internalize our negative and our positive emotions. I feel like when we are in times of stress, in times of sadness, in times of conflict, we often tend to try to reject that part of us. We're like, this isn't me. This is not right. I need to get back on the high horse. I need to not get back on the high horse. I need to get back into my personal good graces. I need to get back into my go-getter mindset. And we want to reject the negative parts of us. We want to reject the parts of us that aren't parts that we are proud to project into the world and proud to wear on our sleeve and have noticed and judged. But the reality is that it is not feasible for us to expect ourselves to be this happy person, this morally correct person all of the time. I think that understanding that we are contradictions can set us free. I think I've seen a couple of comments in the YouTube videos saying how, I was really struggling with this part of myself. Maybe I am, just unsavable in this way, or maybe I'm just wrong in this way and there's no help for me or anything like that. And I feel like it's so harmful to us and to our psyche to think of the negative parts of us as making us unsavable or making us tragedies. I just read a book actually called Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. It's a very, very romance book. I'd rate it a little bit spicy on the spectrum, right? But something that I thought was really, really interesting in that book was how one of the protagonists, she was saying that she thought her story was a tragedy and how she believed that her story wouldn't end with a happy tone. And yes, it's very stereotypical of a book for a protagonist to have that kind of mindset, but I think it's something that we do in ourselves as well. I feel like when I was in my most angsty teenager phases, I often thought of myself as being something that was unsavable, and how, the choices that I would make and the way that I would take care of myself, even, I was like, what's the point? My story is a tragedy. I'm doing good by just surviving, so I might as well just do whatever because it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. But I think that what we need to realize is the yin and yang of our life story, but also of our personality. The good parts deserve a place just as much as the bad parts, but the biggest lesson is that we must not dwell. we should not dwell on our negative characteristics, but they do have a role and they do have a place, and their role and their place is they're being a vehicle for growth. Going back to the conflict episode and in trying to be understood and heard in a conflict, but also the role of conflict in our society, and I think that what it boils down to is growth. When you are unable to conduct yourself through conflict, whether you are that do-gooder or maybe you are that people pleaser, when you are unable to handle yourself through conflict, you are unable to listen to an opinion that is different to your own, that might challenge your opinions, challenge your morals, then you are putting yourself at a disservice in your capacity for growth. The bottom line is that complexity and conflict and differences in opinions and differences in morals bring nuance to our understanding of ourselves and each other. And the more that we are able to accept contradiction, not only in our society as a whole, but within ourselves, the better that we can understand ourselves. We need to remain malleable. It is good to have morals, and it is good to know what you stand for and what you do not. It is good to stand by those, but it's also important to understand when it is time to leave them behind and when it is time to pivot. I think that it is harmful to you to be malleable and to be so strong into your values that you are incapable of hearing anybody out. Now, Socrates once said, "The only true wisdom is in knowing that you know nothing." And I think that that is the greatest thing, even when we're coming back to the example of contradictions within ourselves and our inability to accept our negative aspects as well as our positive ones. And I feel like something that I was thinking about when I was kind of writing my notes for today's episode was how when I was younger, I always thought, okay, if I am a tragedy, this is just where I am at. And then sometimes I would go through a phase where I felt amazing and I was like, wow, I'm on top of the world and it's going to stay this way as well. And I'm just going to keep on building. I'm just going to keep on honing and I'm just going to keep building and shaping and I'm going to know who I am eventually. But the thing is that our story never going to end in a tied knot. I don't know if I'm expressing myself correctly. I think the greatest lesson that gives me so much comfort through every phase of life is that nothing is permanent. And this kind of goes with last week's episode about wabi-sabi and the Japanese philosophy of the beauty and impermanence and the beauty and the imperfect, the beauty and the transient. But I think that this also applies when we think about contradiction. And it's that we need to welcome it because that change, that deviation from what you once knew is going to lead you to better growth. But the one thing that remains constant is change. The one thing that remains constant is the approach of contradiction, is the approach of conflict. Having that comfort within yourself of knowing I'm going to be okay every time things change, even if I'm not okay, that's fine. I know that I will be again later on. That's what gets you through. Look at illness as a concrete example. When you are sick, guys, I was so sick. I discovered I had this disease called RCPD, which basically I have a muscle in my throat that doesn't relax, so I can't burp, I can't throw up or anything like that. And you guys, I was so ill, I was down bad. Without going into the details, I was down bad. And when you are in those moments, you think to yourself, wow, I don't even know what it feels like to be healthy. I don't even know what it feels like to be, good and this is my reality. Like, how am I gonna make my way through this? What if I die tonight? I was like, what if this is it? Like, this is horrible. I'm dealing with the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst. And then I know that in a month I'm gonna be flirty and fun and I don't know, not even in a month, probably less, but I don't know. I can't see the finish line sometimes, but I know the finish line is coming. And just like they say, you can't appreciate the good without the bad. You can't go through the bad without understanding that you'll be good is also true. Everything is malleable. But now coming back to Socrates, He said, "The only true wisdom is in knowing that you know nothing." But he also said, "I know that I am intelligent because I know that I know nothing." To know is to know that you know nothing. I think that it can be pretty abstract when you first say it, but it's basically saying that we need to remain comfortable in the unknown. We need to remain comfortable in that change, in that deviation. Everything that you once knew may be put into question. What else he said was, "I was hated because I asked questions." I watched a TikTok that kind of broke down why Socrates was so pivotal. And it's that what his thing was that he went to all of the experts of their field. He went to a general and said, "What does it mean to be courageous?" He went to a poet and said, what does it mean to be loved, or something like that. He went to all of these experts in their fields and asked them the base of their practice, and they found that they knew nothing about what they had spent so much time honing into. And I think that that is the greatest lesson when it comes to contradiction, is that we need to remain malleable. We cannot remain comfortable in stubbornness. Stubbornness, honestly, is almost a sign of youth, and it's a sign of immaturity. I have been my most stubborn in my youngest years, and stubbornness is almost, it should be a flagship to be like, oh, ding, ding, ding. Maybe I need to take a step back because I don't know anything, honestly. Now, I hope that some of this made sense to you guys. I am not gonna lie, I'm still a little bit sick, but I wanted to provide because I love coming on here every week and I want to remain consistent for you guys. But again, I'm so sorry for my nasaliness. I know it must have been annoying, but I think it's contradicted with my raspy, gorgeous voice. It's not even that raspy. I wish it could go raspier, but it is what it is. But I'm really enjoying my voice as it stands. But I digress. I hope that you guys enjoyed this week's episode. If you guys know a lot about philosophy, please let me know in the comments. One of my dreams was to go to grad school for philosophy, but I just didn't even do that undergrad, and I don't think it would really make sense for me, and I also think I would lose my mind because a lot of people who study philosophy end up losing it, and I feel like the way that I like to learn from it is just like piece by piece, and if you guys know anything or anything that could relate to the episode, please drop it in the comments or DM me. I love seeing your guys' DMs or when you tag me. Honestly, makes my day brighten tenfold. Like, I'm like this. I'm like, oh my god. Like, thank you so much. But I'm so grateful that you guys clicked on this week's video / episode. And I hope that you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to reach out at kalopsiapod, KALOPSIAPOD on Instagram and TikTok, and at Sydney Jotita, SYDNEYDJOTITA on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Again, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys next Friday.